Hey guys, thanks for showing up to the Shiny Things podcast. I'm Lisa Mitchell, communications expert and certified body language trainer. I'm here to help you figure yourself out a little bit and be able to decode other people better too. The goal of the Shiny Things podcast is to get you showing up as your most clued in and confident self in any situation. This season, we're focused on getting real about dating in an app-based digital world. We're going to dive into the good, the bad, and the really ugly parts of dating on demand. With so many apps bringing you so many options in such a short time, it's hard not to get distracted by shiny things. Let's get the conversation started. Today's topic is one that I'm so excited to talk about. You're going to hear me geek out here, so just bear with me. We are going to be exploring the concept of using science to hack online and app-based dating and relationships in general, and to move you from where you are right now to maybe a little closer to where you want to be. And this is awesome because it shows that finding love doesn't have to be left to chance. And there's actually a science behind it. No, like actual data and studies and ratios and propensities and all the predictors of who might be best suited for you and how things might likely unfold based on your beliefs and your behaviors. Like this is good, scientific, amazing data-based information. I recently read the book Love Factually by today's guest, Duana C. Welch. And wow, did I have my eyes opened by the detailed science that exists around dating and relationships. And I really cannot wait to dive in. So we are going to welcome Duana to Shiny Things. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Lisa, thanks for having me. And I'm so happy you're emphasizing the science because I love to geek out too.
Awesome. This is going to be the best. I'm like such a science dork, like people get tired of me, but I think that's how you know when to make good decisions, right?
Well, opinion and cultural wisdom were not getting me very far. That's why I started looking at this. Science is a more objective, more reality-based way of knowing, and that's why I value it.
Yeah, I am right there with you. Let me introduce listeners to you here real quick. And you're best known, which I love, and how I actually found you was for applying social science to people's real life relationship issues. And Duana is the author of Love Factually, which is like officially at the top of my book list now. And it uses science rather than opinion to take men and women through every stage of dating, from before they meet until they're ready to commit. She's been a professor at universities in Florida, California, and Texas, and she contributes to publications at Psychology Today, eHarmony, Redbook, and others. She also coaches men and women who want more love in their lives, and who doesn't really, via Skype and at her office in downtown Eugene, Oregon. To learn more about Duana and her book, you can visit her at LoveScienceMedia.com or continue listening to Shiny Things right now because we are about to get into this topic and I cannot wait. So, okay, I have so many questions I want to ask you, Duana. Like I have a hard time even getting them in an order that's going to make sense. But if you're open to writing along, we are going to jump in here.
It's all good. It's all exciting.
Awesome. Well, I would love for you to start by sharing a little bit about your story, because I know this isn't just like someone's third-party anecdotal evidence that you're referencing. This is something you're very candid about in your book, that this was really developed out of your personal experience and your pursuit for finding your right match. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, someone recently told me that the best way to get good at something is to be really bad at something. And for me, I hope that was true. What happened was I was just really terrible at love. I wanted a lifelong partnership that was happy, and I wanted that more than anything else. I wanted it more than I wanted to get my PhD. I wanted it more than I wanted, I don't know, other things, wealth, fame, anything. And yet the other things were starting to happen, and that wasn't. I kept getting my heart broken, and sometimes I left and sometimes they left, and often I noticed there was a pattern to the types of choices I was making, and I wondered why I wasn't able to see it sooner, and I wondered if anything else could be done about it. So I started looking at relationship science because I had this epiphany moment where I realized that even though I didn't do relationship science research, I was getting my PhD in developmental psych, But even though I didn't do that research, I figured other people must have. And so maybe if I read it and I applied it to my own life, I could kind of treat my own life as an experiment and see what worked and what didn't, and get a little bit of, I guess, kind of distance, kind of the attitude of curiosity. Oh, isn't this interesting? Let me see what will happen if I do this. And it wound up working for me. My husband, Vic, and I have been married for over 9 years now. And we've been together just over 9.5 years now. So we got married pretty quickly after we met. Not something I would recommend for everyone, but the steps that I learned through science helped me. And eventually people wanted to be my clients based on my knowledge base. And my husband really wanted me to write a blog and a book. And I was really hesitant to write a book. I kind of felt like, well, I'm the person who failed at this so many times. Why would anybody want to listen to me? And he said, that's why they want to listen to you, because you know all the science, and because you failed, and because you're coming from a framework of something that really changed your life and your results. And so I did a blog for about 7 years because I was still really hesitant to do the book. And then that actually turned into the book. The blog was kind of a Dear Abby. It's still there at lovesciencemedia.com. Kind of a Dear Abby on science thing. People would send me their questions, people from 30 different countries, and then I would anonymize their letters and answer them the way that we're talking right now. No jargon, just talking. But I would have references at the end. And so I decided to write a book that was like that. And that was how Love Factually came to be.
Well, I love it. And I think you are the perfect person. I agree with Vic. And just sidebar, I don't know Vic, but I love Vic already. Like,
I love him too. It's funny. He was, of course, one of the first readers of the book. The editor and I were, of course, the very first ones. But after he read it, I was on pins and needles. I said, well, what do you think? And he said, this is fantastic. I'm ready to date now.
You're like, no, buddy, slow that up. That's not what we're talking about here.
You're dating me. That's fine.
Right. Well, I love your story, and just thank you. Like, I just want to acknowledge you for being vulnerable and for deciding to own your voice on your experience, because it's kind of daunting to flip your microscope around and examine yourself and your own experiences, and to come real with the things you've done well and the things you've crashed and burned on. And you kind of lay it all out there in the book. And I really just acknowledge you and commend you for the bravery that it takes to do that. And know that it was all put to good use. If nothing else, at least one person has new perspective and has been helped by what you've written. So thank you for enlightening me on new ways to navigate this territory.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I've gotten a lot of letters from people who said that vulnerability did help them open up and stop beating themselves up about what had happened that didn't work out, and instead be open to a new way. I did get some letters from people who said, wow, I can't believe you told people that. One of my pet peeves about self-improvement books that I had read in my past was people who seemed to come from the Mount Olympus of perfection, and they didn't reveal any of their own vulnerability. And I thought, the topic is inherently vulnerable. And the truth is, I am intrigued by the topic, and I got into the topic for reasons of my own vulnerability. So I kind of need to go there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. I call those people that sit on the mountains of perfection the shiny plastics. They're not very fun at a party, for one thing. And because you just know that life is not that great. And you spend half of your time, debating on if you want to just walk away, or if you should be jealous, or if you want to punch them. So yeah, I am not a fan of Camp Shiny Plastic at all. And that is not, I try to be very candid and bring the realness, and, it's not for everyone, but I feel like for the people I'm meant to serve, that they appreciate it. And I appreciate your realness. And, kind of holding your own self up as an example of like, here's what can go wonderfully right, and here's what can go horrendously wrong. And not really sugarcoating either side of that. So it was fun to read. And I think people are going to continue to learn a lot and be served well by your words.
Well, thank you. That's good encouragement. I'm in the middle of writing my next book, and that involves much harder truths about my journey, because this next book will be for single parents, and I have to talk about how I became a single parent and what those particular struggles were like, and that is painful. In fact, I think that's why I've kind of really avoided writing this book. I keep finding excuses not to do it. So thank you for the encouragement.
Yes, and I'll be looking forward to that book as well because I am also in the single parent camp, and that's a whole new level of additional complexity. So anything to help me untangle that, I will be waiting anxiously. So if you have any pre-copies, let me know. I will gladly be the first in line for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hey, I want to jump into a topic. I'll tell you, I like mass consumed this book in a record time because it was fascinating. And I have so many markups and so many comments and a couple amens and a couple all sorts of fun things in the margins here as I was reading it. But one of the topics I really wanted to talk about is you kind of unpack some science behind how we are kind of mating methodology based on really like caveman brain type programming and generational things. And I'm interested to know, because we're kind of in this space now with digital dating where maybe the traditional scarcity or not running into that many people that are in kind of a like space as you has kind of been modified a little bit by apps where you can right swipe or left swipe, 100 people in 60 seconds. How does that change in perceived scarcity or abundance kind of play into people's mindset going into looking for relationships?
That's a really fascinating question. So there is some recent science, more recent than my book even, out of David Buss's lab at the University of Texas, Austin. And that science shows that people definitely use their perceived options around them to identify whether they should stay with a current mate or not. So if I am with someone and I think I could do better, I'm more likely to leave. And I think, that's kind of common sense, but it really ties in with your question. So these apps give people a perception that the mating pool is endless. Yeah. And that there's not really a need to invest deeply in any one relationship. And with my clients, I just flat out tell them I don't want them going on free dating apps. No Tumblr, no Bumble, no more traditional dating apps, maybe that don't require any financial investment or any deep investment of time to fill out a profile. And the reason for that is, as your grandma always said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. If you don't invest and you interact with others who don't invest, what you wind up with is the club of the ambivalent. People aren't quite sure whether they really want a relationship. They're not sure what they're really willing to do to get it. Look, if you're looking for love and you're really sure you want it, you only need to be talking with people who are equally sure that they really want this, first of all. And if you've got kids, you have to be more careful than you've ever been about that. You just can't afford to get deeply involved with people who don't really have intentions of getting deeply involved. And so one of your hedges against that is, first of all, only go on paid dating sites where both parties have to pay to be there.
Love it. So it's setting the intention ahead, knowing what everyone else's intentions are coming into the equation.
Yeah, and knowing your own intention is so important. I have clients who know that they want to live in houses across the street or next door to their partner, but they don't want to share space. They know that. And so they're looking for someone who wants that. They're not ambivalent about whether they want a relationship. They're very certain of the kind of relationship that they want. And so, most of my writing and speaking is really geared toward people who know they want a permanent mateship. But even within that group, there are different types of permanent mateship. And it's really important to be honest with yourself and to make sure that you're meeting people who are invested in the same type of relationship, that you get that question out of the way fairly quickly.
Yeah, I love that. I think that would root out so many sources of frustration, because a lot of it, in my own experience and an experience of friends that have been in this space for a while, it's really mismatched intentions. And it's either, it results from two things I found. It's either from people not doing the work before they get on a site or an app to even know what they're looking for or what they really need. Or if they do know, if they have a very clear kind of non-negotiable approach of what they need to have or what they want, they aren't disclosing that soon enough.
Yes, and there's kind of a formula for getting at the tough questions quickly, because while we want to invest deeply in the right relationship, we don't want to invest deeply in relationships where we're going to get our hearts broken. And so it's really important to, I guess if we were in the financial world, we'd call this pre-qualifying. It's really important to pre-qualify your candidates. But unfortunately, a lot of people go about it in a way that's what I'm hearing in my practice is that it's very off-putting and very threatening to the listener. And so I'm going to give you an example of a threatening and off-putting way to ask a hard question about life goals, and then a less threatening way that people can get on board with. So here's the threatening way. Lisa, I really don't want to waste my time, so I just need to know. I mean, do you want to get married?
This is the part where they start running away.
Yes, this is the part where they're really glad they wear their tennis shoes to the date. Exactly. And they go out and hail a cab instantly. They get an Uber right away. Right?
Yes. They're like, I forgot I have this thing I have to go to.
So here's a way to get at the same type of content without being personal and threatening about it. Lisa, so I was looking at your profile and I'm really excited that we're meeting, and obviously we just know almost nothing about each other. So I'm not asking whether you have any intentions towards me personally with this question, but in general, I just find that I would rather get to know people better if we have a same or shared vision of kind of life goals just in general. And so one of my life goals in general is to have a permanent mateship that involves marriage and family. And, you may or may not want those things, and that's fine. But I just want to know, do you have any goals around how you want your ultimate relationship to look?
Oh, see, that's got a totally different tone. No tennis shoes required.
Yeah, we're just having a conversation about big picture life goals. And most people in my dating experience and in the experience of my clients who are reporting back to me, male and female, what they're saying to me is that wasn't threatening to the person I said it to. That just seemed like, of course, it makes logical sense that you want to save your deep involvement for people who have the same general direction in life.
Yeah. And I think that's really valid too, back to your point that you made earlier about the people who know that they want kind of monogamous companionship, but they also want their space. And to be able to even have that kind of conversation of, my intention is not to live with anyone or have anyone in my space, but I am open to, X, Y, and Z within these parameters. And if you know that up front, it's going to be a filtering device for people that aren't into that, but at least there isn't going to be someone there thinking that it's going to look one way and then being disappointed when it looks like something else, when all you were doing was showing up the way you said you wanted to in the beginning.
Exactly. In my work, I really try to get people to walk away from relationships with super sexy people where it can never work out. We kind of get told that if you're attracted to someone and you're starting to fall in love with someone, then you better hang on to that because love is rare and love is all you need. Sorry, Beatles, not true. And that it will work out if you have love. But, I'm divorced. It sounds like you may be divorced.
Yes.
And I loved my husband when I got married to him. My ex.
Yeah.
And if love had been enough, we'd still be together.
Exactly.
I've loved some of my exes that we didn't wind up married. And if love was enough, I would have been, happily partnered permanently a long, long time ago. So love is not enough. You really need love. Plus you need a shared vision of the future. You need similarity. You need friendship. Yes, you need physical attraction. But you need this constellation of similarities, really, that make it work. And so shared vision and shared values are absolutely vital. I read recently there are some new studies showing that politics are becoming an increasing deal breaker in our current political climate, that people want to date someone of the same or similar political persuasion. And from a science standpoint, that's very smart, because for people who care about politics are a litmus test for what you care about, which is your value system.
Right.
Values are simply something you care about. And so if you care that much about this particular package of values, then yes, make that one of your criteria.
Yeah. So what do you think about kind of going along that line as well, as far as sorting out values via politics and some other polarities? What's your take on really kind of claiming your polarity items or the things that are maybe a little fringe up front as almost like a filtering device?
So you can say anything as long as you say it with fun in your voice and in your tone. I wrote at the time that I met my husband. So one night, just late at night, I woke up and there was this song in my brain. And it was that song, If You Like Pina Colada, that song. It was that song, that corny 1970s song that got redone by Jack Johnson not too long ago. And that song was in my head. And what popped into my head was, if you like green Mini Coopers and ideas are your game, if you're politically liberal and you have a big brain, if you like making love at 1 p.m. while my kid takes a nap, write to me and I'll answer and we'll cut through the crap. Okay, that was stanza one and it went on for 3 more stanzas. And I put that out there and I had thousands of responses. People loved that song.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love it.
But I put it out there. This is what I want, but I did it in a fun way. And so one of the things that I'll often do with individual clients is have them write, well, I do this with everybody, have them write out their list of what they must have and what they want to have. And then in a fun and clever way, make an ad that goes along with their must-haves. I wanted somebody who was not threatened by a woman with a PhD or a woman who has a child or a woman who's quite politically involved on the left-leaning side of the spectrum. And so I put that right there in my ad. And the problem I sometimes had was people who would say, well, I really don't want those things, but I love your ad so much. I want to talk to you. I would have to say, no, those are must-haves for me. So we're not going to be able to make a connection, but that's really cool that you reached out.
Yeah. And that response right there is really, that's clutch, because I have a habit in the name of self-disclosure of, and you touch on this concept in your book as far as the better than nothings. So the people that and I think the phrase was that they're infinite solutions or finite solutions for infinite longing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And it's one of those things where I get in a habit of settling or being with someone who's good enough, but doesn't, have the bulk of my must-haves or all of my must-haves. And then then I get stuck in that territory where you do feel like, well, how long do I let this linger? I know it's not going to progress where I want it to, but there's really nothing wrong. It's just not quite right enough. So this whole concept of better than nothings is something I'd love to go a little bit deeper on with you too, because it's one of those things where if you don't have your clear boundaries and your clear must-haves, you end up with better than nothings.
Yeah. And so I talk about LoveScience with lots of different groups, including seniors, and the older adults that I talk with, they absolutely get it that better than nothing's ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
But that makes you kind of wonder, well, why did it happen if all of us would probably acknowledge that we probably don't want to spend 3 months here, 6 months there, 5 years somewhere else, another 3 months, another year. Most of us really want the whole enchilada. We want love and we want sex and we want compassion and we want a safe place in the storm, not just one more storm. And we want a source of support on every level and of course we plan to give all these things back too. But the truth is better than nothing relationships happen because adulting is hard. Being on our own is hard.
Amen.
Being on our own with children is much, much, much harder still. I remember the end of my days when I was a single parent. Every day from the time my child was in bed until I actually was able to make myself go to sleep was just a struggle. I dreaded that time of day. That was a time of day when I just needed someone around who was an adult. I needed to not carry all the burdens of my life alone.
Mm-hmm.
And even though my mother lived around the corner, which was by design, I bought a house around the corner from my mom. It's not the same. I needed a partner in all of this. And so I I have compassion for why people go for the better than nothing. They do it because doing this on your own is so hard, and because it's hard to have faith that the right person is out there when the almost right person is right there next to you.
Right. Yeah, totally.
It's hard to do. And so back to your earlier issue of abundance versus scarcity, dating apps can make it seem like there's a lot of abundance, but the irony is there are studies that show that people become more stressed out when they perceive that they have more choices. It's actually easier when we perceive that we don't have that many choices, but the choices that are in front of us, we're going to consider very deeply. That's not the same thing as saying go for the better than nothing. It is the same thing as saying know what your standards are, make a list. And I have a guided process for how to make that list so that you know whether your standards are too high. And once you go through that guided process, which is in the book, and figure out whether your standards are too high and figure out specifically how to word them, then if somebody doesn't match one of your must-haves, you must not. That's just the deal's broken. No matter how lonely you are, no matter how attractive they are, don't do that thing that I see happen again and again and again, where someone gets in a relationship for 4 years or more with someone where the deal breaker was there on the first date and they knew it.
Mm-hmm. That would be me.
Well, that would be so many people. That would also be my best friend, who is a case study throughout the book. Since you read it all, I know that you've read all the way through her story. And she did wind up with the right one for her. But she wound up with the right one for her after 4 full years with someone where from the day they met, they were attracted. And so what they did, and the reason that I like to talk about her story, is that they kept telling themselves, well, but this is just fun. We don't have to be that serious. I mean, gosh, should we have to be that heavy from the very beginning? Let's just see where this goes. Well, where it went was a really serious relationship where both of them were devastated 4 years in. And my friend was so devastated that she actually got cancer because her immune system was compromised.
Wow.
And she died of cancer. Fortunately, she also, once she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, she also realized that she was very clear on wanting the right relationship, and she was not going to waste any time in BTN. She simply resolved that she would not do it. She followed the process laid out in the book, and she spent the last 8 years of her life with the love of her life, married.
Wow. That's a crazy story. And I read that. I didn't realize that was was one of your best friends that you were referencing in that story, but yeah, it's not an infinite resource, huh?
No, time is not. Time is, she used to say to me, time is the only thing that we can never get back. And so I really am an advocate for realizing that spending time with the wrong person seems low cost, but it's the highest cost thing you can do.
Yeah, that's really convicting, like in a good way. Because I know so many people that are just passing time, because passing time is easier than being alone or seeking to define more clearly exactly what they want.
Well, it's scary. Sometimes I'll have a moment with a client. Oh, and by the way, your listeners are free to write to me. I answer all emails for free.
Awesome. That's so cool.
LoveScienceMedia.com. That's DUANA at LoveScienceMedia.com. But I also have clients where we do this exercise of defining what they want and what they must have and figuring out the difference between the two and putting it all in positive language. And I have a lot of clients who say it's intimidating even to put it down because they just feel like they're asking for too much. And by the way, there is a way to tell whether you're asking for too much. But even when we go through that process, they still feel like who am I to ask for real happiness?
Yeah, that seems to be a theme that keeps coming up on a lot of topics this season, is the underlying question of worth. Which is a whole nother thing to unpack, but it's really interesting when you're looking specifically at developing your list, like your process in the book outlines. You have to kind of take ownership. You have to take ownership of what you want, and then you have to know that you deserve it and that it's not something you should compromise on, which I think is a really tough exercise, especially for people that have been maybe in dysfunctional relationships or just a lot of unfulfilling relationships. You kind of start to dilute your own wish list or your own must-haves.
You know, the worst thing about a better than nothing relationship is that it quickly devolves from, well, some of my needs are being met, to this need just can't be met. All the concept is kind of, this is all I can have. You start buying it, that this is all I'm worth, this is all I can have. What's really wonderful is that there's research that proves that, okay, we all know that our attitudes guide our behaviors. Like if we believe we're worthless, then we allow people into our lives who confirm that belief. And that's not so wonderful. The wonderful thing is that research also shows the exact opposite. If we only let wonderful people into our lives, our belief in our self-worth follows suit. You can act yourself into a way of believing. And so what I'm really trying to do with that list, I tell my clients, you don't have to let go of this belief. You don't have to let go of the idea that you're asking for too much. You don't have to let go of your questions about your own self-worth. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do is take the steps and your self-worth will follow.
Yeah, fake it till you become it, right?
Yes, it works.
It does. It absolutely does. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you have a quote in the book that says, nobody ever said thank you for settling for me.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been settled for. I'm looking at your picture and you're gorgeous, so I'm guessing.
Oh, thank you. Oh no, I've been settled for, trust me. That's why I pulled out this specific quote. And I have also put people in the position of having been settled for because I didn't stick to my own boundaries and my own must-haves, which is not a good feeling to inflict upon someone either.
Yeah, no one ever says, wow, I'm so glad you spent an additional 3 years in this relationship after you knew it was really over for you, because I'm really happy that I didn't spend those 3 years with someone who was really right for me. No one ever says that. But breaking up is so hard to do. It's just hard to say the words. And that's why part of what I focused on in the book is, how do people want to be broken up with?
Yeah, I love that. I love, first of all, that was even a section that even got attention, because it's just assumed that everyone knows how to end something, but that's why so many people are stuck, because we don't have the courage or the script or the process to be kind to someone while still separating from them.
Yeah, after the book came out, there started being all this talk about ghosting, and I thought, oh no, if you want a kind, respectful partner, you have to practice kind and respectful behavior. And what I know for sure is, if you can find and be someone kind and respectful, your love life is going to wind up really good. And if you can't, it won't. So you got to practice being kind and respectful all the time, not just when it suits you. And so, ghosting, that is so unkind and disrespectful. Just disappearing, that's not okay.
It's a horrible thing. And it's one of those things where the person on the other end immediately takes ownership for someone else's bad behavior. And it goes into, what did I do? What did I not do enough of? What am I not enough of that I would be worthy of so little respect? I think ghosting is the single biggest offense. I think it's the most heinous thing you can do to somebody.
It's pretty awful, because what the ghoster is saying through not saying anything is, you're so worthless. You're not worth my time to break up with or give you any explanation whatsoever. And they're putting their cowardice. And it's funny, I also teach high schoolers. I teach at an academy for the performing arts on Fridays. Which seems kind of odd, because I'm not teaching a performing art unless you consider relationships a performing art.
Which it kind of is sometimes.
But one of the things I talk about is how to break up, because that's a skill that we really need in our high school years. And I ask students, why do you suppose that even though all of us can come up with how we would like to be broken up, and there's a real theme, people really agree on how they want this done, even though we know that, we ourselves are so hesitant to do it. Why do you think that is? And my students in high school already know that the reason is cowardice. We're afraid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I encourage people to practice radical kindness. It is more kind, to do the most kind thing. It is more kind to let this person go than it is to string them along, or worse, to leave them wondering what happened and whether the relationship will resume, which is what ghosting does.
Yeah, it's horrible. I think it's like the most pervasive form of psychological torture in the current marketplace.
Yeah, it's not okay. I mean, all you have to do, folks, all you have to do to break up with someone, and this is true whether you've had 3 dates or whether you've had 30 or whether you've spent 3 years together or whether you've spent 30 years together. 30 years is going to require more of a conversation, but basically it's all the same conversation, and here it is. Name something you liked about the person and then say, but I don't feel the way I need to for this relationship to continue, and I'm breaking up. Done.
Right. It seems so simple.
And the other person, depending on the length of the relationship and the hopes that they nurture, they're going to come back at you with possibly some arguments. But the one thing that's unassailable is your feelings. If you don't feel the way that you need to continue, no amount of discussion changes that. And so you can listen in a kind way to what they have to say after that. Hopefully, you're really sure that you want to break up when you say this. And then you simply respond with, you're probably right about that. I hear that you feel that way. I still don't feel the way I need to continue. I'm breaking up. Don't leave them hanging on with some, maybe if this other thing works out, or, my work schedule's just too busy.
Oh, yeah.
Excuses, just break up.
Yeah.
Man up, woman up, break up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's something that would exponentially decrease the amount of hurt people running around. And then it's like every time that happens and your wall gets a little bit higher and it gets a little bit harder than to own your worth. I think it's just like this crazy vicious cycle of just unkindness. Like you said, it's just people not owning, not being accountable, and not caring enough to take the time and effort to be kind.
I think it makes it a lot easier to do this when we acknowledge that usually when we break up with someone, it's not because they're a horrible human being. It's because there's not a good match. And it's because for whatever reason, truly, we just don't feel the way that we need to continue. We don't need to make them wrong. It's a mismatch. Right.
And that brings you back, brings us back to your original point about knowing what your must-haves are. And if the must-have isn't there, then you must not. Right. And then problem solved. Then you don't have to worry about ghosting or breaking up with people.
Yes. And then, it's funny. So Vic had all my must-haves, just in spades. And I wasn't in love with him. He was already in love with me, and I wasn't in love with him, which also goes along with research showing that when men fall in love with a woman, they tend to fall faster than the woman does.
I thought that was fascinating too. I love that section explaining that, because I would have thought it was the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause stereotypically women wake up in the morning knowing I want to be married, and men don't. Men want to be married to you once they've met you. And so, and there's this idea that, I've heard women say it over and over again, that men are so selfish, but in fact, men are very focused on serving the woman that they love.
Right.
Or if they're with a man, it's the man they love. But speaking from a heterosexual standpoint, my book actually does address same-sex orientation as well. But speaking from a hetero standpoint, when a man loves a woman, he can't wait to do things for her. That's how I knew that Vic was in love with me on our first date. We met online. We'd been talking initially over email and then on the phone. And we skipped the whole texting thing. I don't recommend that for getting to know someone. But then he came over. I felt like I knew him well enough that he could just come pick me up for our first date. And there was something wrong at my house. And he noticed it. And he got a chair. He stood on it and he fixed it.
Nice. Acts of service.
He looked at me. And the fact that he did that, I thought, he's already in love. And he told me later, that he was in love with me from before he saw me.
Wow.
And so, men who they love you, they want to do things for you. They they can't do enough for you. Even now, if I mention something that needs doing, even if I'm not asking him to do it, I just mention something. He wants to do it. But he doesn't want to do it, well, I started to say he doesn't want to do it for the whole world, but truly my husband really, he has 9 volunteer jobs. So he is a person who does take care of people and animals and things and stuff like that. But that is a strong sign. But you know what, Lisa, I can't remember why we're talking about this.
We were talking about the must-haves and how Vic had all your, because if, they don't have must-haves and you must not, and it avoids the breakup and the ghosting and gets you this whole cycle becomes dissolved because you just don't engage in it.
The reason I brought that up is that Vic had all my must-haves, and he wanted me to see who he was and to see his worlds because he loved me. He wanted me to have 100% of the information about him because he didn't want to wait. He wanted this. And so he took me to parties to meet all of his friends. He made sure that I met everyone in his life. He introduced me to his son. He made sure I knew his ex-wife. He made sure that I met everyone, and he said, I'm an open book. You can ask me anything. And I did. And again, in a fun way and in a way that wasn't, overly personal or threatening, but I made sure I got the information. And so what happened was, for the first time, I was able to afford to fall in love, knowing that this was safe. We focus so much on physical safety in sex. We don't focus enough on emotional safety in sex and love. We don't need more scars. Any of you out there who are over 25, and I'm guessing that's virtually everyone, all of us already had scars by that age. And we don't need any more. And what I liked about science was it let me stop amassing emotional scars and start doing love in a new, brave, open way.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important. And you're right. We do amass a massive amount of scars by 25, if it even takes that long. I think most of my initial love beliefs were formed, in early relationships in junior high school age even. So by the time my 20s came, I got married at 22. I was like, yeah, I'm done with this. Like I started dating him at 18 and was married at 22. I'm like, I don't ever want to go back there. And then I went back there. For a number of reasons. But no, I love that point of view. And I really think it's really about forming good, healthy boundaries and getting really clear on what you want, and then only engaging in situations that are a match. It's like it's pain prevention.
Yeah. I have a cousin who's a romance novelist, and it's funny because we met each other after we were doing our respective writing, but she was saying that she really liked that I presented love as a choice. At some level, it's really not. We can't make ourselves love someone we're not at all inclined towards. But at some level, it really is a choice. It is a choice to allow ourselves to get deeply emotionally involved with someone where we already have the goods on them that they're not right for us. That is a choice.
Yeah.
Because the other choice we can make is, wow, you're attractive, and too bad this can never work, and stop spending time with them.
Yes. Not settling. That's a big challenge for a lot of people. I mean, you have this weird thing of this weird kind of contrast between everyone having fear of missing out, right? Because the next better person could just be one swipe away or one match away. So people are historically having one foot out the door anyways, because something better might come up. So they don't want to commit and put effort into just one thing. So you have that whole like false abundance mindset. And then you have, settling, which is staying or committing to one person that is not and was never the right match for you because you're either fatigued from dating or you just don't want to work harder, or it's just you've already spent too much time. You feel like you can't get out of it. It's like the weirdest contrast, and they're both super prevalent scenarios.
Yes, I think that's brilliant that you present them together because I think they're related. I think that the fear of missing out, swipe left, swipe right thing leads to the exhaustion that leads to settling.
Yes. I don't know what we just did there, but I feel like we connected a dot.
I do. I think the people who are listening to this interview are very fortunate, don't you?
I do. Yes, I do.
And that was all you, Lisa. You connected that dot, but I really do think those things are related. I think that if we take dating seriously enough, that we stick to, again, this is for the commitment-minded people who just want to play the field. Go ahead and do it. There are limitless, abundant options if you just want to date here and there and have sex that doesn't mean anything to you. And I'm not opposed to those options, but that's not what I write and speak about. I speak to people who want, the whole thing.
Right.
And if you want that, you need to stick with resources they have enough barriers to entry that only the serious are there. They could be really fun people, but they're serious about commitment. They're serious about finding a relationship that they want to have work for a lifetime.
Yeah. And that's actually a perfect segue to where I wanted to head next, which is speaking about commitment and getting kind of what you're looking for there. And one of the ideas that you spend a decent amount of time kind of unpacking in your book is women playing hard to get, or moving their partner's motivation towards commitment forward. And I would love to just spend a minute on that, because I was like, because hard to get is kind of this thing that we have presented to us as antiquated or rule-based, or it's kind of got like this negative connotation, I think, for the, quote unquote modern woman. But I love the amount of science that you had behind the recommendation or behind the strategy. So can you share with the listeners a little bit around how the moving commitment forward correlates to being less available or harder to get?
Sure. Well, there was a big study done by David Buss, and I am blanking on the other person's name right now. It'll come to me later. But it was a multicultural study that showed that first of all, men tend to have two mating psychologies running in tandem virtually all the time. And of course, your mileage may vary. Men who are listening today, you may be a one-woman kind of man. There are such men in existence, but the norm, by norm, I don't mean better. I just mean the more frequently found mindset is a mindset that looks for a long-term partner to commit to, as well as short-term mating options. And so women tend to primarily, when they're single, have a long-term mating option. They sometimes do switch into casual sex mode. Some women do. But the dominant model is that women are looking for a long-term option. And even when they activate a short-term sexual option, strangely enough, that's often to try to get somebody long-term. So even women's short-term mating strategies often are geared toward long-term strategies. So women tend to think that any sexual interest from a man might mean that he wants to make a commitment. And to men, they unconsciously and easily shift women from the category of Miss Right Now to Mrs. Right and back again, because they have both strategies happening at the same time.
Interesting.
So these scientists found that when men were looking for a wife or a long-term partner, their standards for the woman's behavior and appearance were very different than when they were looking for a casual sex partner. And that if a woman met a man's casual sex standards, he very rarely was willing to move her into a long-term slot. Is this fair? No. Is this the way that Duana wants the world to be? Definitely not. I don't like double standards. I would like to point out that I am a feminist with a PhD who has had control of my own life for the most part. So this is not the world as I wish it, but it is the world as it is. In other words, I'm not justifying it.
Right. That's just what science is telling us.
Yeah, it's what science is telling us. It's interesting. I wrote Love Factually. I thought women would primarily read it, and initially I planned to write it solely for women. And then the voice that was, so when you write, at least when I write, there's a voice to the work. And the voice that was in my work was speaking to both genders.
Yes.
And I realized about a third of the way through, this book is for everyone. And, but I don't think everyone's going to read it. I think it's going to be just women who read it. not to downplay how important women are, but I didn't think men would read it. Well, I was wrong. About a third to a half of the readers are apparently male. I hear from gay men, straight men. Of course, I hear a lot from women, but that blew me away. And what's interesting is men, gay and straight, tend to write to me saying, wow, you totally spot on nailed male psychology. I've never had anybody explain it that scientifically, yet compassionately and with understanding and without hatred before.
Right.
You totally get guys. This is what I hear from guys. What I hear from women is men aren't like that. I hate that you put that in your book. I'm not going to read chapter 5. I'm really angry that you put it in there. Look, women, I do not make up human psychology.
Right.
I just report on it.
Right. Exactly. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's not the truth.
I don't like it either, but ignoring the truth is not helping me. And it's probably not helping anybody. And so, that's, again, why I rely on science instead of opinion. Is opinion was telling me, hey, you know what, go ahead and initiate stuff with guys. I mean, they like to be acknowledged too. They like to have their ego stroked also. Go ahead and offer to pay for half of this meal. They like to be treated now and then. Go ahead and if they call you at the last minute, go ahead and be available. Show them your spontaneity.
Right.
Nobody wants a prude. Nobody wants somebody who's set in stone.
How much bad advice do we get as women? Like tons of bad advice. I have been told all of those same things too, not having until this past reading extravaganza where I cranked through your book at record speed, not having any of the scientific context to know, oh, that's kind of having the exact opposite effect of what I'm not endearing myself to him. I'm taking his hunt away. I'm taking his challenge away. I'm not allowing him to pursue me.
I'll tell you who really hates. Let me tell you what hard to get is, and then I'll tell you who really hates it. Hard to get does not mean bitchy or aloof or cold.
Right.
This is one reason people, and it doesn't even necessarily mean manipulative. Hard to get means having high enough self-worth, or at least faking high enough self-worth, that you are only available for men who care enough about you to make some effort to have you. It is about, look, everyone wants the prom queen. I'm sorry, but it's true. They want the girl who could afford to say no to them. Not in a bitchy way, but just she's genuinely too busy to be available on a Friday night. She's already got plans. Even if her plan was Netflix and chill by herself, she already had a plan. And she doesn't have to justify it to you. She will very sweetly say on Monday when she answers your call from Friday, I'm really sorry that I couldn't hang out with you on Friday, but I appreciate that you reached out to me. That's not mean-spirited. It also is not, why don't you use me for a booty call? Because I'm always available at the last second.
Right.
Which is what being available at the last second conveys. Again, this study that I'm talking about showed that men view last-minute availability and openness to sex very quickly. They view that as miss right now behavior. Think about, okay, so I know you didn't think we were going to go here today, but we're going to talk about duck genitals for a minute. Ducks.
Fantastic. It wasn't on the outline, but let's go there.
Lisa, your photo, it just looks like someone who wants to know about this. So.
I love it.
So there's a concept called coevolution. And probably if you've learned about this concept, you learned about it in the sense of hummingbirds have long, thin bills, and these flowers have long, thin openings. And these two features match really well so that for both the flower and the hummingbird, this is an adaptation. An adaptation is anything that helps an organism to survive and to cast its own genetic material forward into offspring. There is also coevolution within species. So, for example, with ducks and genitals, unfortunately, there are species of ducks that rape the females. And the females, in order to avoid being raped, have evolved really complex hoo-hoos. Yeah, you can use that. That's a science term.
Right.
Their vaginas twist to the left and the right. They're like corkscrews. And the idea is, well, it's not an idea, it's a reality. The reality is this makes her very difficult to penetrate unless she is willing. However, because she has evolved in this way, there's a constant evolutionary arms race. The males who succeeded in having more sex with more sexually fertile females are the winners. By definition, more of their progeny live, and they don't just carry forward the male duck's physiology, they carry forward the male duck's psychology that says rape.
Wow.
Take what you want, whether or not the female is willing.
I had no idea the struggle was so real for ducks.
The struggle is really real. So what's happened is male ducks have psychological adaptation. Again, adaptive sounds good. I don't think this is good at all.
Right.
I'm not making if I were going to make a moral pronouncement, it would be that I hate this. I did just say that, in fact. So it's not that I think it's adaptive in that sense, but the truth is the male ducks that raped had more male offspring who then carried that psychology forward. Another interesting thing, the male duck penis has evolved to be corkscrew shaped. Say that 5 times fast, which means that the females and the males are embattled in an evolutionary arms race where the female ducks get a more and more complicated shaped vagina and the males evolve a more and more complicated shaped penis. Now, how does this relate to people even possibly? How it relates to people is women created men's ambition. And that's why we have to be hard to get. And let me back up. We women can only have 1 or 2 offspring a year. If we have twins, we can have 2, no matter how many males we have sex with. And therefore, women haven't really evolved a strategy to have sex with as many males as possible. You know, all we would have to do if we did want to have sex with as many males as possible is say, hey, well, how about it? I mean, global research shows the easiest way for a woman to get laid is to say she'd like to. Men wish they inhabited a world like that.
Right.
So we don't have to do that. To cast our genes forward, all we have to do is find a fertile partner, and almost all males are fertile. Therefore, that problem's solved. But we do have the problem of surviving once we are pregnant, because our physiology and our psychology comes from evolutionary time, not from historical time. It's ancient. And women in the ancient past would not have been able to pop over to Target or Walmart to get their needs met. They would have had to rely on providers and protectors, and especially one that they were sexually involved with, who felt responsible for their offspring. So what women did is they preferred men who brought in more meat from the hunt. By the way, there are modern studies of tribal peoples that show that's exactly how women today behave in those ancestral type situations. So we think through anthropology, we've got a pretty good beat on this, that women, in fact, have throughout evolutionary history preferred better provider and protector men. And that therefore, today, throughout the male species, in every culture in the world, men try to provide. They really try hard. They go for high status because women go for high status. We have created their evolution.
Right.
But you know what, women? They don't stop caring about status when it comes to their wife. They care even more. So this is one reason why being hard to get helps you. Just like everything else that we cause them to evolve to work hard for, they have to work hard for us too.
Oh, man.
And if they value it about the same way they would value anything that they got without any effort. Not much.
Right. Interesting. So we've created our own monsters.
You know,
right.
You really don't have to be bitchy to do this. Really high status women naturally do this. For those of us who struggle with self-worth and with our feeling of whether we're high status, we have to fake it till we make it. But my book gives some really concrete hints for how to do that. And if it feels a little gamey, you know, what you're doing is asserting that you have high enough self-worth that you're not going to be an option for someone when what you really want is commitment. You're not just going to be one more option.
I love that. I feel like to bring it back to digital dating for a moment and some of this app-based craziness, I feel like if women had kind of stuck together on minimal expectations, we could have avoided so much of this. But I feel like women collectively and in some ways have, I don't want to say dumbed ourselves down, but they've made the standard, I'll use the term standard of care so low Like there are very seldom like no barriers to entry for sex with some women now. It's just like, if you give them attention, you get sex. And that's just one example, but kind of that process of, women seem to be working in scarcity mentality. So there's very little barrier to entry because competition is so fierce, but all we've managed to do is lower the standard. I feel like men now sometimes, and I don't want to broad paint everyone with this generalization, but I feel like now that men don't know how to act with a high status woman because there's so many that aren't now. Does that make, like, we're conditioning men, like the whole evolution process, right? Like they had wanted to provide, but now we're telling them they don't have to provide because we'll just take whatever they give us sometimes. And we're almost like undoing all the work we worked to do in caveman days.
Well, not to, so here's the good news. It's also kind of bad news, depending on your situation. Our inherited mating psychology is not easily undone by current cultural trends. Our inherited mating psychology persists despite them. So that's in fact why giving men everything they want up front is leading to lower commitment, not higher commitment, because men are still carrying around the caveman mating psychology that says, oh, she had sex with me right away, she'll have sex with everyone right away, and she's low status, and I don't want that. They're still carrying that psychology around. Even if the woman is technically very high status, something in them just says, oh, I'm not as interested anymore.
Right.
And again, there are studies that bear those statements out. So current cultural trends are not reversing millions of years of inherited mating psychology. What really fascinates me is that we don't just inherit what we look like and the form of our physical bodies. We inherit what's between our ears. We inherit a certain set of thoughts. So everywhere in the world, women would prefer a tall man to a short man. Everywhere. There's not an exception to that. And in the ancestral past and today in tribal societies and today in modern societies, tall men tend to be more successful. They tend to have more of whatever the coin of the realm is in that society. And they tend to be better at physically defending women from the aggression of other males, which would have been a big problem in ancestral times. So women want that. They don't know why they want that, but they do.
Right. Men
want youth and beauty. They don't sit there and say to themselves, she has a 0.7 waist to hip ratio, so that means she's both fertile and fecund, and I shall tap that. They don't know that they're looking for a 0.7 waist to hip ratio, but we now know mathematically that's exactly what they're looking for, and that is associated with the apex of fertility and fecundity. And yet what men know is, I just want that. So we have this set of thoughts that is pre-programmed into us. And even knowing these thoughts consciously, even when you learn about them through science, it's still hard to not keep wanting that. I still meet women in their 70s. Again, sometimes I teach at senior centers and I'm supposed to this Thursday talk on Radio Free Europe, I think it is, to a group of older people in Spain, and they want to hear about dating. And what I encounter is women who are still looking for resources and provision, and men who are still looking for the appearance of youth and beauty. And they don't know why they're still looking for this, but it's actually not serving them. I guess what I'm getting at is knowing how the opposite sex thinks, knowing it, and knowing how we ourselves think. These things are largely unconscious. Once we know it, we have an expanded repertoire of options, both to send the sex that we want, the signals that they have to have so they can go for us. I mean, because that's what women are doing when they are hard to get, not playing, but being hard to get, is they're sending men signals that intrigue men. You have to start out with both people being intrigued. I mean, that's just a necessary start. So you're sending the signals that allow some footing for any deeper knowing of each other to happen. You're not going to do this forever, but it's so they'll even approach. And then you can choose your behaviors from a conscious basis, hopefully after that, instead of just going along with what used to work for people who lived under the overhang of a rock. And I like to think that we're going to have more options than someone who had to wonder if it was going to be dry under their particular rock that night.
You would hope. You would hope. Oh gosh. I'd like to say confidently that we've evolved further than that, but some days I wonder. Some days on a dating app, I just have to wonder. I'm not going to lie. Oh my gosh. Well, Duana, I could just not quit talking to you forever because there's so many. I'm not joking when I say I have this book marked up and notes in the margins and all my little commentaries and amens marked throughout really the entire book. And so I'm not going to make you stay on this call with me all day, but I do love what you said. I want to let people know or have you share, this is good stuff. I don't know anybody in the dating world that doesn't need to know more of this. Where can people go to find the book? Where can people go to connect with you? What's the best way to help people get more of this?
Oh, well, thank you. You've been so kind. So you can get a free chapter of my book at Love Factually. That's with an F, lovefactually.co. And you can learn more about the book there. If you want to connect with me through email, you can go to my website, which also has information about becoming a client. I do see clients on Skype. You can find out all that kind of stuff. Plus, you can hear other podcast broadcasts, and you can hear or you can see question and answers that I've had with readers at LoveScienceMedia.com, LoveScienceMedia.com. And of course, every place that usually you would think of going to for buying books is going to have this book.
Awesome. Well, okay, guys. So go jump on Amazon right now, go to the website, order your copy of Love Factually, 10 Proven Steps from I Wish to I Do. You will not regret it. I promise. Keep your pen or your highlighter handy because there are so many great nuggets of understanding. You're going to want to mark your book up for sure. Duana, thank you again for sharing your knowledge. It's vast and amazing. And you're going to hear way more from me because I have lots of questions. I feel like maybe another episode is going to have to happen because there's still a lot to unpack here. But for now, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with our listeners. Hopefully everybody is feeling a little more clued in and a little more confident now. That's always the purpose here at Shiny Things, is to help people go out in the world their most clued in and confident selves. So I want to just thank you guys for riding along with me today on another episode. And you can't always control how someone else is going to show up, but you are totally in control of how you show up in every situation in your life. Dating is no exception. And now you have some great new scientifically based information to work with. And to get the outcome that you really want, you need to show up as a person that you need to be. So read the book, get informed. It's totally on you. I want to know how you're putting today's superpower moments to good use as you're out in the wild this week. Tell me what's working for you. Tell me your stories. I'd love to connect. You can send it to lisa@powerbodylanguage.com and tell me all about it. And who knows, you might even end up on an upcoming episode with me. Until our next podcast date, keep showing up as the person you want to be.